say, why did you go off your meds? Right? And the common reason was, well, the side effects are awful. Right? I already knew that. What I did is I went to the DSM and I pulled up all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. Hearing voices, seeing monsters, having nightmares, feeling paranoid, people are chasing you, uh, people talking in your head, just voices threatening you. It's just a hell on earth. And in my opinion, from what I saw, it's much worse than the side effects of these psychiatric drugs. So I would list all those in like a check sheet. And then I'd bring these people in and I'd ask them, I'd say, okay, you went off your drugs. You told me that you went off because of the side effects of those drugs, which are horrible. I said, write down all the side effects you experienced on the drug you were taking. And they'd write down a handful of side effects that they didn't like. Dry mouth, blurred vision, feeling like a zombie, kind of shuffling. They're bad. They're really bad. And then I'd give them this check sheet of all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, the audio-visual hallucinations, all the symptoms. They check each one of these that you experienced when you were off your drugs and you went psychotic. So they check out a bunch of those, and then I'd hand them both sheets back, and I'd ask them, which one is worse, the side effects of the drugs or being psychotic? Every single one of them said going psychotic was worse than the drugs, the side effects of the drugs. And then I'd ask them, well, then why do you go off your drugs? And their answer was, I don't know. I don't know for 3 freaking years. I don't know. Right? So I would ask every single one of them that went off their drugs, and I got the same answer all the time. I don't know.
So at this point, are you starting to surmise that once you start coming onto the trail that this is a spiritual malady, that there might be other intelligences involved here, that it was those intelligences that didn't want to be suppressed?
Yes. And that happened 7 years in, where that became close. After working at that hospital for 7 years and I started seeing these patterns that these voices ran. They were running fixed, repeatable patterns. So here's psychiatry insisting that these things are auditory hallucinations. But here I am seeing pattern after pattern after pattern appearing, right? And if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. They don't run patterns. You can't predict what a hallucination is going to do. Right? So 7 years in, this came clear as to what was going on here. Now, the other thing I saw that I couldn't figure out. So here I am gathering all these pieces of this puzzle. It's just giant puzzle, and I hate puzzles. I don't like doing puzzles. But here's all these pieces of the puzzle that didn't make sense. And one piece was that of all the staff at that giant psychiatric hospital, the one staff person who was being assaulted above all the rest were psychiatrists. They were being assaulted by schizophrenics at a rate, equal to that of attendant staff that were on these psych wards 24 hours a day. It wasn't psych nurses who were being assaulted. It wasn't psychologists who were being assaulted. It wasn't doctors who were being assaulted. It wasn't counselors. It wasn't, workmen. It was psychiatrists, and I'm like going, these psychiatrists at the state hospital would only see these patients for 20, 25 minutes a month. How are you doing? How's your meds working? And if they made any complaints, they'd jack up the meds. So most of the patients lied to them and said, oh, I'm doing fine. The voices are quiet or they're gone. They didn't want to tell them because they knew that if they told them they were still hearing the voices and the voices were still bothering them, they would put them on more drugs and turn them more into a zombie than they already were. Right?
Okay, so let me ask you something here. The patients themselves now. What you're describing is a situation where a person is acting, as I said before, as a spiritual conduit. But are these patients that you are dealing with over the years just more psychically and spiritually talented and sensitive than other people? Was it a specific thing, trauma point in their life that made them susceptible to some kind of a spiritual attack? Because, we're all spiritual beings. I just wonder if there's anything about the patients that connected them all together, if they were more open, or if it was trauma, if trauma was a big part of everybody's past.
Yeah, there's a one-to-one correlation between horrendous physical, psychological, and sexual trauma. I mean, virtually all of them were traumatized badly in one way or another. Now, when I left the state hospital and went to work for the psychology department of the state prison, I found that there was a large number of prisoners who had been using amphetamine, and that amphetamine opened them up, and they became psychotic through the use of that drug. The prisoners called amphetamine the devil's drug. So they would start out, they'd start using the meth, they'd feel like Superman. They had a lot of energy, it made them feel good, they liked taking the drug. And then they started hallucinating, hearing these voices, while they were high. And they went, oh, well, that's just a hallucination, it'll go away when I come down. And it did for the most part. And they might have heard those voices 10, 15, 20, 50 times. And they went away when they came down. And then one day they didn't. And they were just as psychotic as any of the schizophrenics in the psych ward. So there's something about meth that opens these people up to these negative forces.